Well, I don't know about you, Kirby, but I have kind of like somewhat of a committee in my head, right? Whenever I'm in doubt or trying to find like the motivation, I'm just like I like hear such and such as voices in my head.
Hey there, and welcome to a brand new episode of Delivering Marketing Joy. I am your host, Kirby Hassman, and joining me today is a brand new rock star. I've had the opportunity to be on his podcast, and we'll probably talk about that. He's a Marketer of the Day podcast, and he just drops episode 1150. I was looking at it as we recorded this. He's the bastion of consistency. Robert Plank, thanks so much for joining me.
Glad to have you. And we have some mutual friends as well. I can't remember, his name escapes me right now, but
Yeah.
doing all that podcasting, sometimes I see like, oh, like I know that person. We have a mutual friend together, and his name is escaping me, but it'll come to me later. But we have lots of overlap. Jared Lopiccolo, that's who it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Jared's great. He has been on here, and then obviously he's been on your. And how he not? I mean, when you've got 1,150 episodes, you've been doing this a lot. That's amazing.
But there's still so many people I haven't spoken to.
That's exactly right. There's plenty of opportunity for content. So that kind of leads into the first questions. Like, when we're kind of having these conversations for the first time, I know you've got a lot on the ball. So what is something that you are like a project you're working on right now that has you totally fired up, and why?
My project that has me fired up is called DFY Podcast, Done For You Podcasting, and that's where me and my team manage people's podcasts. And so we'll have someone like you who talks to a lot of people, who has a message, but then there's so many social networks, right? There's so many, like, to put it on YouTube and the website and the podcast directory. So that's what has me fired up is DFY Podcast, because we can jump into different people's niches. I have a client that he has like a network of private schools, and another client that he's like religious and he teaches like kind of faith-based finances. So it's kind of like you get the blend of the certainty and the variety, and check all the boxes as far as the technical and the marketing. So it's a lot of fun. DFY Podcast is what it is.
That's really cool. And I do find that when you're working with other kinds of businesses, it is kind of fun because you get to get like an inside look at how they go to market and what their unique proposition is. And so that's pretty cool. That's really neat. So who are some people, and I think this happens to everybody, we all are looking for inspiration, people to lift us up. Who are some people that inspire you to be better, and how do they do that?
I don't know about you, Kirby, but I have kind of like somewhat of a committee in my head, right? Whenever I'm in doubt or trying to find like the motivation, I'm just like, I like hear such and such as voices in my head. So I would probably say that my biggest mentor of all time is this guy named David Kavanagh. He's an Australian. He lives in Thailand. And the way that I would tell people about him, I would say he runs 12-day workshops. And they were like, that's a vacation. That's a retreat. And so this guy, David Kavanagh, he's like just got tons of energy, and he's a people person. And I used to think when I was younger that I wasn't much of a people person. Like, oh, I'll just leave that to someone else. But like in this day and age, especially with the networking, the LinkedIn, the podcasting, the Zooming, we have to be people, if that's the phrase. Yeah. And so I'm always working on that. I'm like, well, what would this guy David Kavanagh do? And he runs these events. He like sets up websites. I've put out, I think, 13 books for him and his business partner, compilation books. And that's a whole other mix of like different people's stories. So David Kavanagh has been a big mentor because he's a people person, because to some degree we all need to be, no matter what the excuse.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you're making, because I think we'll hear people say, well, that you're an extrovert or you're an introvert. And to your point, I think sometimes it's not that you're one or the other. We are often all on a spectrum of how we feel that day. And we got to put that on like a pair of pants. Like, hey, I'm a pretty extroverted person, but there are times I don't feel like doing it. And I have to be like, okay, today I have to shake hands. Today I have to do the interviews today. And it's like your point about saying, look, David Kavanagh would do it this way. And I need to channel my David Kavanagh, if that makes sense.
Yeah, some days are easier and it's natural and you have the momentum, and other days you have to apply the deliberate logic and focus and kind of overcome your emotional limitations. And I think that's what separates guys like you and me from the people that don't really make it. And like, I mean, my whole life I've been frustrated when,
Mm.
like you go to different like business partners or joint venture partners, and there's the people that just like give up. You do the product launch, send the email, it doesn't work out, and they just say like, "Oh, move on to the next thing." You're like, "No, wait, hang on. Let's fix this. Let's debug the system." And I mean, I had that problem even going back to like school when there'd be group projects. If
Yeah.
it got a little difficult, next thing you know, the person just like would leave it to you. You'd have like 3 or 4 people on a team, and you'd have to like shoulder the brunt of it. It was so frustrating. And so that's a big, I don't know if it's like a pet peeve or like a quality to look for in someone is like, do they persevere even
Yeah.
on the days when they don't so-called feel like it?
So what, like, obviously you do the Marketer of the Day podcast. You've done, well over 1,100 of those. So you've, obviously you're a marketer yourself, but you're talking to marketers. So what are some mistakes you see organizations make when they're telling their story? And maybe if you've picked up anything along the way of how to fix that.
Yeah, so I would say that like an easily fixable low-hanging fruit is in presenting your story in the wrong order.
Okay.
And like, we all talk in stories, we all think in stories, and your story has to have a beginning, middle, and an end. And you've done enough podcasts as well where when you're at the end and you're asking your guests like, "Hey, where should someone go? What's the next steps?" And they're like trying to teach new stuff, and you're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Like we're past that phase. And so I
Yeah.
think that just that alone would cut down on the awkwardness. And I have this book here called Why, What, How to, What If, and that idea has like changed my life so much in the communicating and the storytelling. This whole sequence of like, well, say you want to tell someone about some concept like a marketing funnel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, where do I start? Do I tell about the software? And you say, well, hey, start with why is this important? What's led you to, what frustrations have led you to needing
Right.
the landing page? What's the context? And before I even get to it, what's the what? What are the tools? What are the principles? What are the terms? And then teach the step by step. And when that's done, then you push someone onto like the what if, now what's possible, what transitions to the next logical course of action. And that sort of applies to everything, right? Especially
Yeah.
podcast interviews. Kind of think about like, well, when we're starting our conversation, let's just focus on the problem. And then the next few minutes, let's just focus on some alternatives or some tools. And then let's get into the step by step. And then once that's done, you say, cool, you're on a podcast. We've given you a taste of what's possible. Now here's some steps to go. Just that sequence, I think, helps me so much.
Yeah, I love that. It is funny. Like we do jump around, and I was having this conversation with somebody on my team literally today that we were getting on a call with a potential marketing client, and I was like, we need to start with the challenges, and let's see if they're. And it was funny because I did exactly that, and they're like, yeah, that. And so by doing that, it immediately were like, oh, okay, they must understand me because they understand the problems I'm struggling with. So I think that's great advice, Robert. Final question for you. What is something that you recommend people start doing as soon as possible today to start making their business or their life better?
Today, start podcasting, start communicating.
Yeah.
And it can start with you. Record your phone, record your web camera, post it to your YouTube channel, and think about this sequence, right? And especially think about how you can explain the most basic, simple concept possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're all about marketing with joy, and like you have a video like 4 ways you can choose joy. That's very easily doable. And put it into Chat GPT and have it give you some suggestions, and you're off to the races. So I would say hit the record button, record a YouTube video, even like 3 or 5 minutes, and then approach other podcasts and just find shows in your space. Doesn't even matter what size they are. In fact,
Yeah.
the smaller sizes are better. And just say, are you taking guests? And then if they say yes, then show them that YouTube video you created, show them that LinkedIn profile, but like start teaching, communicating the content, looking for shows to be on, such as your excellent show.
Thanks, man. I think that's great advice. I think, and I think what people holds them back is they're like, oh, I'm not ready for this. And I think the reality of it is whenever you start, the first few are going to be rough. That's just like, you aren't great as a rule at something right away. You have to be bad before you be good. So I think that's great advice. So you mentioned it, but I want to dive into it. Where can people find out about your services around podcasting and a little bit more about you?
Well, this book that we mentioned here is www.hwbook.com. If that piqued your interest, as far as that, there's a sort of a proven structure where you can keep some of that roughness you mentioned, but
Mhm.
also have the character, personality,
Yeah.
polish. You kind of can have your cake and eat it too. That's the book. But then what that passion project is, the thing that gets me really excited, is dfypodcast.com. And the idea here is that you can just create the content, whatever that means for you, right? You create the videos, you have the guests, you have the Zoom calls, give it to me and my team. We'll cut it up into reels. We'll write the show notes. We'll do the SEO titles. We'll get it posted on all these things. And you might have heard that there's all these like social posting tools, but sometimes they break or you have to get relogged in. And so you still need, even with the most advanced tool, you need a person or a team kind of working on things, right? And
Yeah.
posting to all the platforms and making sure things are on a schedule. And my team does that. dfypodcast.com. You make the content and we'll put it out there.
That's
Robert
awesome.
Plank.
There you go. Well, Robert, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. This was really interesting, and we'll have to do it again sometime. Okay.
Let's do it. Count on it.
All right. Well, cool. That's going to wrap up this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll see you next time.